It's day 3 of Legal Week 2026. This is, it's early. It's the morning. We've had coffee. I'm with Rhys Hodkinson from Definely. He's the Chief Revenue Officer. His career starts at Baker and McKenzie. God, you're a cricket player and a rugby guy, and you like boats, and you're backed by. I want to say you went to Cambridge. Like you're one of the smart guys in the industry. Did I oversell you? I mean,
You definitely oversold me, but thank you. That's very kind. So lovely to meet you, and thank you very much for having me.
oh, you're so very welcome. Let's talk a little bit. But this is going to be a really basic. The series that I'm going to do now with the market leaders in the space today are really going to be big. What are you doing? How are you doing it? Who are you doing it for? Why? And then we'll get into a riff. So let's do the basic, like why, who, and why did you buy? Why did you build? Why did you build Definely?
So like a lot of us in legal technology, it was just to solve for a problem we face day in and day out as lawyers. And what we found was there was a lot of legal technology out there trying to solve for, automating routine tasks, things that were high volume, low complexity. But for so many of us as lawyers working on 200, 300 page contracts, often on matters that didn't have a huge amount of precedent, it hadn't been done 100 times before, there was very little technology helping lawyers at that tip of the spear. And so really the whole purpose behind Definely was to give lawyers the toolkit within Microsoft Word that they would need to work on those 150, 200, 300 page contracts. So whether that's no longer having to scroll back and forth to find the meaning of defined terms or have 400 different contracts open and be context switching between them, it's always been about trying to surface the data that lawyers need at the point that they need it.
Is that an interrogation of sorts? Is that a Q&A? How does it work?
Yeah, so basically I'm sitting on section.
And let me thin slice just who are we talking? We talking about litigators, M&A, corporate finance? Who specifically, draw us a picture of who that user is?
Almost always it's transactional lawyers.
Transactional lawyers, great.
M&A, real estate, private equity, both on the corporate legal side as well as on the private practice side.
Big world out there.
Big world. And, just an example use case of one of our most popular sort of pain points that Definely solves for is lawyers find themselves on page 75 of 300. They want to just read the single provision in front of them. It's always been impossible for them to do that without having to consistently leave that clause, because that clause is going to refer to other documents. It's going to refer to defined terms. It's going to refer to schedules, annexes, exhibits, and they have to go fetch all of that information to understand what that particular provision is telling them. So Definely will scan that contract, identify all of those external sources of information, and then essentially allow the user to double click on whatever is in front of them, and we'll pull up the relevant information side by side with the clause being reviewed.
I think it's interesting that Microsoft and Google are investors. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So M12, which is Microsoft's venture capital fund, they led our first funding round. And, I think that they saw that what we were doing, essentially the way that lawyers would solve for this problem before Definely was using the tools that came out with Microsoft Word in 1995. So 30 years later, people were still using, print out the contract, Control F, or simply scrolling. And so, what we were really trying to do is optimize Microsoft Word for complex contracts. And they saw that essentially for them, anything that makes their product more sticky, anything that can make Microsoft Word that much more valuable to a particular user group is of interest to them. And actually, less so than the capital that they gave us, that expertise for building within their environments,
Access to their engineers, access to the back.
Exactly. If you're adding to Microsoft Word and you slowing down Microsoft, or you making it more harder for a lawyer to run Microsoft
They're gonna
Word,
buy you to kill you.
they're not gonna like you a lot. So yeah, it's been great working with them.
Fantastic. Tell me what VDOT2 looks like. You've kind of explained, here's VDOT1, here's how you get on board, here's why and how lawyers are using it. Let's call that prior state.
Yeah.
What's current state and or future state look like?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So actually, people saw that first tool and they said it's simple and brilliant because it solves a problem. But actually, really where we are going in the current state is what our underlying product essentially does is it breaks down the syntactic relationships that exist within a contract. Contracts are not like books. You don't start at the beginning and read to the end. because they're cross-referring, because they're not linear in how they're structured. You need to be able to take the definitions, take the cross-references, take all of these different documents to paint a map of how this contractor is talking to themselves. And actually, when you start using that as essentially your RAG, or you start using that as the mechanism that grounds AI, large language models, agentic systems, you can actually build really, really powerful tools. Something that I'm sure we'll get onto in a little bit is, for a company like us with the fast pace at which technology is going, we need to wake up every day and say, what's our moat? What's our defensibility? Why are we different to everything that's showing up every single day? And it's essentially offering that grounding of reasoning, that grounding of understanding in contracts to really build highly complex and highly precision-based tools for lawyers working on complex contracts.
So for those that are catching up just a little bit, when you say context, I hear you say memory. I hear you say that the system is learning from each and every interaction it's having with each and every attorney, and that it doesn't have amnesia. It's not coming to a new contract for the first time. It has some history of understanding. Am I getting that right?
Correct.
And can you break it down for the novice? Like, I know that you live in this world every day, but for those that I don't know what you're talking about. What do you break that down so that it's understandable?
Yeah, sure. I'm sorry for getting ahead. So
no, you didn't get ahead at all. It's just you.
So we not only ground the product in that particular contract, but we also look at the contracts that lawyers have worked on previously.
There you go.
And it's not just about contract to contract, it's right down to the granular level, right? So that definition, which is one small portion of a 200-page contract, but which can carry substantial risk, how has that definition been used in the past? How has it been used in the firm? And how can we give the lawyer that information at the point that they need it to then make a much more informed decision? And I think that's something that we're leaning into more and more. We are not positioning Definely the way we position Definely is we much more of an ally to expertise than a substitute for it. And the reason for that, and I know we sort of just riffing, is one of the biggest pieces of feedback that we're getting is there's a lot of pressure on law firms, especially from their clients, to be using generative AI technologies more and more within their operational kind of rigor and how they produce contracts. But if there's a professional negligence claim, or if you miss something because you're under pressure to use all of these tools to go quicker, the client's not going to sue the generative AI provider you use to create the contract. They're going to sue the firm. So you are being asked to move quicker, but at the same time, you've been held to the same standard, and you're still liable for the output. And so that's how we try to position the technology.
I want to go back to this piece that when you said ally. What I think what's important for the community to begin to understand. I mean, some of the community does, but if you don't, here's something that came up for me early on that I grasped and got. Oh, I get how to use Claude. I don't use Claude as a tool. Very rarely is it a tool for me. It's not even a colleague, right? It's really an ally, right? I think it's going to become my boss in not too long. We're going to talk about that at the very end of this, like who's working for who. But when you understand, I'll use Claude and you can use Definely. When I think of Claude, I can certainly ask it a question and it'll retrieve it for me. But when I go in and I ask it to be an ally in strategic planning, and it knows who I am, what I do, what's solid, who is the solid community, who's in the solid community, the diversity of my solid community in the Cowen Cafe and this. When it knows the nuances of who those are and what my last 20 podcasts were and what came out of it, I gave Claude the instruction the other day of read everything I've ever written about solid over the last 11 years. And it came back with a summary. I'm like, first of all, I couldn't find everything I'd ever written. And it did it in, I don't know, I think it was 11 minutes. Yeah. Talk to me about being an ally. Definely as the ally, not the tool, not the colleague, but the ally.
Exactly. So, when we sometimes talking to lawyers and we talking to, these teams, when we say, is it actually speed that you're after? To your point, is it just I can do something quicker? Or is it I can make sure every angle is covered in a way that would take me 3 weeks to potentially have to cover all of those angles? I can now go to a system like Definely and say, hey, based on my past 10 transactions, poke holes in how I've drafted this, identify something here which maybe we've done in previous transactions that I potentially missed. And would you draft this in a different way, the way we present that information is not actually that we automatically change the clause or we automatically just start redrafting, but you're able to present so much more information to the user that much more efficiently in a much more compressed, digestible way than them having to go read the past 100 contracts. Suddenly they're much more confident in what they're able to produce. And, to your point and so how I use it, it's challenge my thinking. Have I missed something? How would you approach this particular problem? Am I trying to be faster, or am I just trying to be more robust and more diligent in how I approach a problem?
Everybody's faster. Yeah, that's V.1. We're past that. Now we're talking about, you're at V.2 in this conversation, which is capability and quality.
Yeah.
Which is leaving me with what I've been calling the AI dividend, which is time, right? So I've got time left over. Not only am I faster, I've got capability, quality, time. What do you want to do with it? Let's think about it, Rhys. Let's think about this case. We can now think for X number more hours than we ever could before. Because it took us, if it was a 10-hour thing, maybe it's 100 or 1,000 or 10,000. But if it was 10 hours, we spent 8 hours just getting to the thinking point. And we could spend 2 hours thinking about what are we going to do and how are we going to do it and strategy. And now we're like, it's only 2 hours to figure this part out. Like, let's spend 8 hours figuring out how to be better about it.
Yeah.
Does that resonate? Am I getting on the right thing? And at what point is finally going to do 9 hours of the 10 hours, and then I'm going to be left with an hour?
Yeah. And I mean, this AI dividend, it's a great point. And if I'm completely honest, I don't think people know what to do with it yet. And I think the reason why I say that is you haven't seen business models change to reflect that AI dividend. And so, it's great, and we can sit on these podcasts and say, cool, we've got this added, look at all of these things that we are changing. But on a year-to-year basis, it's still prices go up for the same services. Like, have we seen a true foundational shift in how we pricing this in, how we building business models? And the answer is no. And I think I always say there's, when I was kind of studying, there's always this thing about blue ocean strategy, right? So that's what iPhone did. You create a new category of a strategy and then you go to it. We almost had this situation with this technology where it was almost like a blue ocean product. The product came out of nowhere. People weren't necessarily prepared for it. And people are now trying to reverse engineering into a strategy. And I think that's leading to some of these things where it feels piecemeal, and some of the benefits we've seen are not actually showing themselves out in the way that you would expect to. If you were faster, if you were more efficient, and you could produce a higher quality output, some business like metric should have shifted. Either firms have become, or corporate legal teams rapidly more profitable, or they would be able to bid more aggressively on mandates, not just because there was client pressure to drop the price, but because they could reap the same margin off the same thing. And I don't think we've seen that yet. And I think this AI dividend, everyone's scratching their head. What do I do with it?
So I find this part of the conversation just absolutely fascinating. Is where I was hoping we were going to get to. So you've got the current state with current clients, with current thinking, and it's sort of like, where are we jumping the fence? Who's pushing you, right? Are they young startups, AI first law firms? Are there some young bucks, young talent, in law firms that are like, hey, what about this? Who's going, how about this? Instead of making what we do better, faster, right? That's not a challenge. That's not where we are. We're not going to get to Mars or the moon by thinking like that. Who's like leaving Earth's gravitational pull and going like, what about this? And you're like, wow, that's out there.
I think you have to step almost a little bit out of the legal community for that right now. I think you would be surprised at how much the foundational models are thinking about these things, not only in a what is the 10-year state and how do we own that 10-year state, but they're even diving into it from a vertical perspective. I think there's a sense that these large language models or frontier models, whatever you want to call them, they kind of operate more like the cloud providers. And I think people are thinking that because it gives them comfort, right? If they AWS, Azure, GCP, then all you want to do is you just want to get people using your cloud, because the more they use it, the more money you make, and they're happy just offering cloud services and they don't become anything more, right? That is not how the foundational models are thinking about this. Yes, they want you drawing down tokens. Yes, they want you using cloud as opposed to ChatGPT because that makes them more money, but they're not stopping there. They are aggressive. They want to own the space. They want to own the vertical. They want to, be the future. And I think we have conversations all the time with corporate legal teams, with our investors, with law firms, with other vendors in the space. And people are thinking in terms of maybe, to your point, V1, V2, and, people are saying, I think in 12, 18 months, we're going to get there. You go and talk to these foundation models and they're like, so 2030, this is where the world sits. And they're 10 steps ahead. All right. And I think it's something that we just need to bear in mind is that there is a lot of much deeper and much more kind of future state thinking going on at that level than there is at us. And we just need to own that.
So future state, I'm going to take a hard right here and see where it goes. So Microsoft, after just 2 months, says, okay, Copilot, after Cowork comes out with Claude, Microsoft in 2 months goes, we're going to partner with Cowork. Yeah. We're going to partner with Claude and Anthropic. Like, I didn't see that coming. Did you?
No.
And yet they're nimble. They're nimble.
They can open AI or something.
Yeah, well, exactly. But they're nimble enough and they're smart enough to say that this is where the world is going. And I don't know what the macro strategy is. I'm just going like, that's wicked smart. Yeah. And because I'm a Claude guy, and now I'm a Claude guy and a Copilot guy, and now I'm Claude and I'm Copilot and I'm Gemini, and I'm like, I use all 4 of the LLMs. I've got a 4-car garage. I like to say I've got a 4-car garage. I mean, what do you have?
Yeah, so I mean, Perplexity is really big, but we.
No, you got a 5-car garage.
Yeah. Got cloud. We find, Gemini incredibly useful. A lot of their offering, like Gemini Canvas, Notebook, LM is great because if we're doing pitches to big companies, I can upload their past 10 annual results. I can upload 5 of their competitors' last 10 annual results, and I can just run a huge comparison and build a pitch deck about how a tech forward company is.
All right, hold that thought right there. It's exactly where I want to go. At what point do you have an agent that does that for you? You have to give those instructions to each one of those LLMs. Like, at what point do you not have to do that, and your agent is instructed to do that because it knows how you work, because it's watched you work 2 or 3 times before?
We should have that already. Like we are building that, but it's
you are building that.
Yeah, and those.
Are you building that, or are you going to buy that off the shelf? Is that going to come from the app store? Is that going to come from the agent store, or is that going to be something you've got to still build?
I think we'll still build it ourselves, but once you build it, it runs, and it's an actually interesting point. So something that we see is we're not hiring junior software developers, machine learning engineers anymore because you can use systems like Cloud Code. So you hire mid-level and up, but then who's your mid-level engineer in 3-4 years from now if you're not hiring juniors? So what you can actually do is you can hire junior developers and these machine learning engineers at a fairly good rate because obviously there's a small job market for them now, but you focus them on building these internal systems for you, driving operational leverage through building these things, and you create a candidate talent pipeline in the future. I think that's something that's going to be really interesting. And, something I was talking about, the 4-car garage. This is, for us, I think, the big question. We've always, with a fair degree of confidence, said Microsoft Word is the stickiest interface for lawyers. They're very seldom going to, leave Microsoft Word. I do still think that's true, but I do think the hegemony of Microsoft Word is diminishing because the question we have to ask ourselves is, which interface do we show up in, right? I don't think we'd be silly to be like, people are going to choose the defining interface in 5 years over Anthropic, Perplexity. Mm-hmm. If you have a license to us and you have a license to Anthropic, do you really want to have to keep switching between 6 different interfaces, or could you just call Definely within your Anthropic interface and use our skills within that? And I think that's the big question of which interface is going to become the standard. Where are people going to spend more time? And how do you, let's say I've got a license to the Wall Street Journal, I've got a license to Financial Times. I don't want to necessarily have to go into my FT app, but I could go into Perplexity. It knows I've got a license and I can say, summarize today's news for me around X topic in the Financial Times. And I can just stay within a single interface. And that kind of race for who's the UI of the future is an interesting one as well.
We're absolutely getting there. We could continue down this road as much as I'd like to, I want to be mindful of your time. Yeah. I know you've got a crazy morning, so I'm going to ask you one more question. This is something that I've been playing with, and I'm going to ask everybody today about what I'm going to call the Sweet 16. So I think we need some kind of a Sweet 16, some kind of a framing in our industry right now. So we know who the core four is, right? We've got a 4-car garage, and you could say it's a 5-car garage with Perplexity, but you've got Chat, you've got Copilot, you've got Claude, and you've got Gemini. So those are your core four there. Okay, and you can add to that if you want to, but those are your core four. In the other core four, you've got your e-discovery platforms, right? So you've got Relativity and Everlaw. You've got Disco and Reveal. There's another core four. The market knows this, right? We've got 4 and 4. Then you've got the rest of the market. I need another 8. I'm trying to figure out how to frame this up, right? And where do people go? So you certainly have on the legal for legal side, you would say, okay, Harvey and Legora.
Yeah.
Are there 4 legal on legal? You want to put GCAI on there? I don't really know, but you certainly know it's a battle between Coke and Pepsi with Harvey and Legora. I don't know if I get a nifty core 4 there, but that's 2. You've got Thomson Reuters and LexisNexis in the research space. Okay, that's 2. You've got your 4 big, and then I'm going to see where you want to go with this. And then you've got your core 4, or your big 4. On the ALSPs, you've got Epic, you've got Concilio, you've got Integrion, and let's throw Elevate in there for the 4th, right? Although Elevate and 5 other guys can argue for who's number 4. But okay, now what's left? How do we define this up to go like, hi, here's the Sweet 16?
Sure. That's a good question. I think
Rhys's look on his face right now is, I'm so sorry I agreed to this podcast. I don't know who this Cowen guy is. I'm never coming back again.
I think the one thing we need to think about is the Venn diagram of overlap of functionality within that Sweet 16. There is a lot of room for people to start edging each other out, and for that Sweet 16 to slowly diminish down to 8 and then to 4, potentially as the market consolidates. What I would say, and something we are starting to see, is people kind of saying, look, the race for the Swiss Army knife is still playing out. Who's going to be the broad AI utility layer within the firm or the corporate legal department? We don't know. Copilot, Anthropic, Gemini, Harvey, Legora, they're all moving so quickly, but the overlap in terms of features and functionality is quite high. But what we could do is we can start to identify where are the scalpels, where are the very deep vertical expertise
Absolutely.
that we can go into where it's not so easy to replicate. In 9 months, I don't have my COO or my CTO coming to me and be like, why did you buy that? That's immediately been replaced by this new model or this new launch. And so there is a layer of security and just going into specific workflows, specific categories and saying, look, how do we just buy best in breed to solve for this? And we kind of just have to have a bit of a hold, buy something for the short term on the broad utility layer and let the market shake out. Because to be honest, anyone who tells you they know how this market's going to shake out is probably just lying to you.
I think that's absolutely true. I mean, I think we'll I'll close on this comment and then your thoughts, if you will. I don't think it matters what you buy right now.
Yeah.
I think you just have to pull out your wallet and just got to get in the game. I think we're like for those of us that have had young kids or have young kids, it's like it doesn't matter what sport they male, female, just like you've got to join a team. You don't have to like a team. You can say, I don't ever want to play sports again. When I was in middle school, I went out for everything, right? I went out for wrestling. I went out for soccer, baseball, basketball, everything. I hated wrestling and never wrestled again, but I loved swimming, track, and the rest of the sports. And I was better at some than others. And like, I had my choice. I think we're all just in middle school. Like get on the court, get on the field.
Get on the ring. 100%. You have to just make a call. If you're trying to sit back and wait and deliberate, you're gonna be left behind and you're gonna be waiting 5 years. So just buy something and honestly just be smart about it. Don't buy into a 4-year license. Get into a 12-month license and then have a right to move away if you want to, but just start experimenting.
I think that's so good. Any questions for me?
No, I've loved this. Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on.
I can't wait to meet you again next year. And we say, okay, remember when we first met in 2026? Because this is our first meeting. We're going to do this again. Maybe we'll do it at Clock.
Cool.
In May, which is like a short distance. I can't imagine we're going to cover that much, but we will definitely do this again next year.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
By the way, if people want to get in touch with you, right?
Yeah.
Do a little commercial. Are you hiring right now?
Yeah, we're hiring.
Do a commercial.
Hiring across the team. So
this is Definely. They've got offices all over the world. New York, London,
West Coast. So definely.com. You can go onto our LinkedIn page or you can reach out via our website. But yeah, we're hiring, we're growing really fast, and we're looking for really great talent.
So let's say there's somebody that's bold and ambitious and radically curious who's listening to this.
Yeah.
And they're like, I heard you on the podcast, and they want to reach out to you directly. Like, they're that gutsy, okay?
Connect with me on LinkedIn.
Somebody please be that gutsy who's listening to this and go, reach out to Rhys, R-H-Y-S. Reach out to him directly, DM him, and have the courage to go, I heard you. I want to work for your company. I've done some research. Do not chat GPT or Claude because he'll know that in a minute. Write it for real and go for it.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate the time.
My
Cheers.
pleasure.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this show, be sure to give us a like and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your shows. And if you want to take your career from now to next, never eat alone.